Hello everyone and welcome. Sit back, relax, make a cup of tea or whatever you like to drink and get ready for new stories from Yellow Cat. Send your own favorite stories in the comments below and maybe they'll be in our new video. So subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed yet. Let's get started. Have you ever stood up in the middle of a work shift and left your job? Why, if so? Part 3. Long story, not so short. I wrote like 8 paragraphs just on backstory, then realized no one cares, especially since there'd be like 8 more paragraphs. I was a customer service rep at a small S insurance company that's part of a white-collar hustle that holds up S-human and billionaire Don Henke. Poorly run and staffed by mostly immature, uneducated people who behaved like they were in middle school. Even though I dropped out of college for financial reasons instead of academic ones, I was overqualified, but I still worked very hard and was by far the best person on the team. This was said by the insurance adjusters we worked for and who benefited from or were effed over by our work or lack thereof, not my jerk of a boss. My jerk of a boss only cared how things looked. She would call these 2 stupid, lazy jerks rock stars in company meetings, even though they did bad things like lying to customers that we didn't handle certain claims. They just didn't want to enter their claim or look it up to help them, which was our job. They made our job even worse than it was before. I had made enough money to pay off my debts and finish my degree at UCLA. I was sick of the place. I was stupid enough to let them know ahead of time that I was going back to school. About 2 months. Not ever again. Not more than 3 weeks later, the 2 jerks gave their 2 weeks' notice. They knew their free ride was over and they could no longer pretend they did something while riding on my coattails. The horrible twosomes replacements were hired before they left, and this jerk had the nerve to make me train their replacements. I had a lot of work to do while I watched these 2 people do nothing but sit around all day. When I trained the new girls for the 3rd day, I was really busy and stressed. I wanted to talk to Monica, who is my W boss. She told me over and over that she didn't have 5 minutes to talk the whole morning. At noon, I went to her office, and she was rude AF again. She said, "I don't have time," in the worst way possible. So I just looked at her and told her I quit. Went to my desk and started packing up my few things for myself. She then called the vice president, Gordon Pennington, who had insulted me in front of many people because of Monica's lies. He tried to persuade me to stay. First, for as long as my notice was good for, about 6 weeks, and then, after a few minutes of not going anywhere for him, just until the end of the day. Over and over, I asked him when he was done, and he finally let me go to HR and get my last check. I don't care about Gordon Pennington, Mike Gonzalez, or Monica, whose last name doesn't matter. They've been sued more than once for racial discrimination and different kinds of harassment at work. Don Henke, Knight Insurance, Gordon Pennington, they all suck. When I got the job, I had to fix a team and structure that were not working right. Some more professional help was needed with the way things were being done, which is why I was hired. Having worked there for a week, I saw what was wrong and started to suggest ways that things could be improved without being forced to do so. It's clear that this didn't go well. Hearing things like, "You're new, we've done this before, don't worry about you." I put people in charge, talked about the problems, and suggested ways to fix them. I think they told me to just do it then. The team thought I was a newbie and didn't have the right or authority to just do it. So I gave them some more ideas and tips on how better to do what they were trying to do, which pretty much took me out of the game. I could no longer do anything and was pretty much cut off from all communication. The people in charge told me that this was my job, which is why they hired me, and that I shouldn't involve them and just fix it. When I got to work, I told myself to say hello. If no one replied hello, I was going to leave. When I said hello in the lunchroom, everyone turned their backs on me, and I left. The next day, they called to ask why I didn't show up. Told them it wasn't my fault and that management should take care of it, and that was pretty much my last day. After having a great new job for about 2 years, I called someone in the area and they told me that company no longer existed, which came as a big surprise. I have a few stories to tell. The first time was when I worked as a construction worker for a jerk and flipped houses. He gives his workers too much work and not enough money. He always finds a reason to yell at you. He is always putting people down. He was yelling at me and another guy one day and told us we had to stay late to fix something. Even though it's not unusual for him or the construction business, he was very rude to us today. We all laughed, joked, and talked S after he left. I couldn't stand it any longer, so I called him up and told him what I thought of him when I said above, and that he could come here and fix it himself. After telling him what I was going to do, I hung up the phone and quit my job. About after 20 minutes, he called me back to try to say sorry. He said that his bad behavior was because he was stressed and had just had a baby. Sorry, but I didn't accept it. Landscaping company I worked for also told me that as an office worker, I would be in charge of crews and clients. On the first day, I learned that part of my job was to drive people and some of the equipment, ride on mowers, etc., to very large job sites. At the first site, I called my boss to let him know I was there. Before going to the next site, he told me to help the guys finish the job. I'm dressed for an office job, not work in the field. Since I was only 1.5 miles from home, I gave one of the workers the keys, called my boss, and told him I wasn't happy with my job. I then quit. He tried to talk me into going back to the job to wait so he could talk to me, but the only reason I took the job was because it wasn't field work. Also, I worked at a restaurant for years before things started to go badly with the owners. I had known them for a long time and knew that everyone there was so unhappy that they were leaving before their Friday night shift. I talked to the owner calmly and told them why people were angry. They didn't feel valued because the owner was mean to everyone. I gently told them why I was upset and that I didn't want the possible workout to hurt them or us. The owner didn't come to the restaurant for 3 days, but we didn't leave and had a good shift. When they got back, they told the staff and customers that I was trying to force them to leave their own restaurant. From then on, they gave me all the bad shifts. The last straw for me was being pulled from an upstairs party just minutes before the food service started, which is when things can go badly. I told them I quit right then and there, taking off my apron. They could mail my last check. Tell me about an HOA or neighbor who has been a nightmare for you, Part 3. It's not my story. A neighbor of mine had a big problem with the HOA in our neighborhood a few years ago. The land around here is sold by the acre, and we live in a farming neighborhood. A lot of people have horses, cows, goats, gardens, and other animals. 2 acres of land are on a main street, and 1 is across a small dirt alley that is used as a horse riding area. That's the house next door to mine. In our neighborhood, the HOA rules say that each acre can have 2 large animals. This means that if you have 2 acres, you can have 4 large animals like cows, horses, etc. That's why this piece of land was naturally good for 6 big animals. Now, this homeowner runs a place where people can ride and train horses. The horses live on the 2 acres, and people ride and pasture them on the 1 acre property. Their booths were full at this point. It has 6 horses and 1 small horse. If you don't know what a mini horse is, it's not a pony, but more like a horse. Well, it still looks like a horse. It's about the size of a donkey. The HOA really scolded them for having more large animals than stated allowed per acre, since it was registered as a mini horse. First, they used papers to go after the owners, but they fought back. The HOA eventually realized they didn't have a case because donkeys weren't big animals, and the mini horse was about the size of a donkey, so they found other ways to scare them. They stopped lessons to argue about small things. The hose wasn't coiled up this morning, stop what you're doing and fix it, and file paperwork, etc. They also started tossing their trash can around and leaving trash all over the yard, only to get fined for leaving it out all morning until the owners found it. The fight went on for as long as the mini horse lived his natural life. We don't have HOAs in the UK, but there are still people who like to think they can interfere. First story. My wife and I bought an ex-council house, which is a low-rent property owned by the state that's rented to people with low or no income. In spite of the bad reputation, these homes are usually very well taken care of and don't cost much. At the same time we bought the house, a new neighborhood was being built right next to it. Because of this, we had temporary fencing blocking some of the gardens and driveway. A little annoying, but only for a short time. After 6 months after we moved in, the housing committee of the council sent us a letter saying that we hadn't mowed our lawn enough. because of the wall for the nearby construction site. They told us they would cut our benefits and kick us out if we didn't mow the lawn in a week. The 3-sentence answer I sent them said this property is privately owned and not rented. Because construction's still going on, there isn't enough access to the garden to do maintenance. F off. Since then, we haven't heard from them. Second story, when I was a kid, the couple next door was crazy and retired. They put up security lights all over the house and would open the door to check on their brand new, valuable BMW every time someone walked by. After a year, they got a new car, but this one never left their driveway. A kind of F all you peasants to everyone in the neighborhood. Anyway, there was a big old oak tree on public land in front of both houses. This existed before the whole housing estate and was used for climbing by kids in the area for many years. The crazy people were offended and kept asking the council to cut down the tree, because leaves would get on their car from the wind. When I went home to see my family a few months ago, the tree wasn't there. It turned out that Mr. and Mrs. Bat-S hired someone to cut down the tree from public property without permission. They're being sued by the city council and almost every person who lives on that street. Okay. My wife and I are going to the west to spend 2 weeks with our family. We had no lawn problems because we lived in a condo. When I get back, my bike is gone. The HOA just came by, clipped all the chains, and took the bikes that looked unused. I asked my neighbors about this, and they said that's what they heard. I went to the office and saw that horrible woman sitting there. She tells me that she locked up my bike when I ask where it is. I asked her without any kind of form or notice. She also said she sent emails and put up flyers. When I asked her to show me the email, she said she couldn't because the other HOA manager sent it from their computer. So I want my bike back and for them to replace my $30 lock. She turns them both down. I tell her it's theft with no proof of crimes and refuse to give my things back. She says she'll get my bike. She calls security and he leads me to where my bike was locked. I ride my bike. Now, I stress because there were a few other bikes up there. It was white and green. The other one was white only. Mine might have been worth $50. I did have a $30 lock with a $50 bike. On my days off, it was the only way I could get around. It was clear that the other bike, which cost about $200, was better. After I take my bike, the security guard who showed me where the locked bikes were comes knocking on my door and tells me I got the wrong bike. I think he's wrong and tell him to F off. I didn't say that last part, but I was really thinking about it. He says I talked about a white bike and I told him that mine was white with green on it. I also said that it was clear that my bike was worth less, so why would I take the wrong bike if I was going to take one? He gives me a mean look and says, "Enjoy your new bike." That's how I looked. I slammed the door and got mad for an hour. These jerks took my bike, lied about letting me know about something, and wouldn't give me my bike back. You can then say I stole my own bike? I figured what the H, they're not going to get away with this. I went to the neighbors and found out which one of them had the missing bike. It was a very nice family with a teenage son who owned the bike. The kid was upset because he'd saved up for it. I told his father where he could find his son's bike. He turned out to be ex-military. He just went straight to the HOA office, and he was obviously very angry. I followed him. He was very angry and yelling at them. The woman couldn't even say a word out of fear. Well, the man was very imposing. Anyway, he took his son's bike and promised to sort them out. A few weeks later, at a tenants meeting, he proposed a change of management. He was supported by 90% of the tenants, including me. As it turned out, all this time he'd been talking to every tenant who had complained about the HOA. That monstrous woman was fired, as well as the rest of the managers and the security guard. The new management is much better. They don't steal private property and act for the good of our condo. If you want to watch the part 2, click the link here. Thank you for subscribing, the likes, and comments. We're very happy to see you all in the comments too. Thanks for your support.